move ahead, but basically I think we're pretty good. Martin, can you the only question that I had was the choice of community that you used as a baseline for cost was, I think, Ammon. You're on mute by the way, just so you know. Okay, there you go.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. From your team's document, it looked like you picked Ammon as a model. I was just wondering how you chose that as the one that you used. Was it just here's one and we'll use them as a model, or was there something specific that drew you to them as
quite frankly, as I was looking up, other cities, how they financed it, theirs was basically the only city that, literally broke down how much it would cost per user.
Okay.
They basically, they did it, they expanded their municipal internet service in a way that, I don't think would work for the city, the city of Albany, right. Because basically they, were selling it, they were encouraging homeowners to essentially buy themselves a connection up front or to finance it for 15 years. But I thought a raw number like that would kind of be useful in determining a per household cost of such a service.
Right. I'm just thinking that with that, we might want to say that a little more explicitly. We understand that this example may not be a good fit because of the model that they used, but we do think it's but we will look for a community that is a better fit moving forward. Our goal was to provide a framework for calculating household cost. I think that would be good to clarify because, I read it and I know the stuff that we've been talking about. And that was the only question I have. I'm like, okay, one, it's a population of 13,000 people. I thought it was along the lines of what you just said, but I wasn't sure. So I think
that's fine. I can easily specify that.
Great. I think that would be the only thing that I saw that leapt out at me. And I'm like, oh, okay, we need to clarify that a bit more. But I thought it was good. A lot of good work went into it. There's no question. Diana, with you, from talking to Jeff earlier, and this was one of my thoughts. I know you've been back and forth with the city planning department about what they could provide. And I seem to recall from past meetings that one of the things we had hoped to get from them was if they could include in a map for us, a mapping of the city of the city's utilities rights of way,
mm-hmm.
so that we could see what could potentially be utilized to map laying out the network itself. That should be a component they have available to them because it's a city right away. But I'm not sure. So if we could ask for them to include that on a map, that was one of the things that occurred to me, certainly.
Hey, Craig.
Yep.
That actually may turn out to be more of the water department's
really
domain, just in terms of availability of GIS mapping. Definitely check with Brad in planning, but you might get bounced over to
water department.
Paul Banky over in the water department. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point. Dana, can you check with Brad and just see if that's the case? But yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I want clarification on that because I appreciate Jessica initiating the contact, but I wanted to know what exactly you wish to have represented and depicted on whatever graphics that we will be providing.
Right. And that's certainly one of the things that occurred to me right off the bat, because that's the layout basically for power lines, telephone lines, basically any utility. And this is, well, it's not exactly a utility, it's on a par with one. Because it's a network, it's fiber.
And I know the utility poles are a major component as well.
Right. So so light poles would be part of that. So National Grid would have been part of that. Now we bought the poles back from National Grid. So, we're now in a situation where pole maintenance is actually on us now. Last I heard, they were either going to or had actually bought them back from National Grid. So that would be one of the things, certainly. If anyone else can think of anything specific that we should ask for, definitely let's chime in on that. Jeff, can you think of anything? Martin?
I'm thinking. I don't have anything off the top of my head, but
Okay.
maybe mull it over a little bit.
Yeah, if we can get that to Day within the next day or two, I think that would be a good thing, because I really want to keep that ball moving. Now that we have the contact, now that you have the process ongoing, let's move that along, because I'm sure it'll take time for them for them to compile. Even if it's just a matter of saying, okay, we're laying layers on top of layers, it's still time that someone has to take to do that. So I think
so you're looking for the I guess the entire boundary, correct? Or
Yeah,
should we try to like narrow it down to just like a section?
well, that's the question.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too.
I think we do want citywide as one piece, but I also think it makes sense to look at the underserved areas, which we know are on underserved areas, as separate maps along with that.
Okay.
So if we do this as a phased approach to laying out the network, we say here are the areas where we know are dramatically underserved in the city of Albany, which is primarily the majority of my minority neighborhoods across downtown, the South End, North Albany, our Arbor Hill and West Hill. And if we have those as a separate map, just say, okay. And then we may, if they can do it, want them to break that down into separate maps for West Hill, North Albany, Arbor Hill, South End. So we can say, one, here's a piece where they all can connect and where the lines would go across. And then for phase 2, do we want to come up to Midtown, come up to Uptown, and then out from there? What makes the most sense as far as if we take a phased approach to do the progression? Because it really is based on one hand, where the need is greatest and where we think there'd be the most utility. The good thing is, that would also cover a good portion of the city's commercial core, where we'd be picking up, basically commercial clients, which would offset, we hope, some of the cost for the homes that are involved.
Hey, Craig.
Yeah.
If you're looking specifically for data about utility poles, you may also want to talk to the energy manager, Jason West.
Okay.
He might have that all collated. I don't know if he would have that mapped necessarily, but he would have that data.
That would be useful. It's not just the utility poles. I'm interested in the actual rights of way themselves.
Okay.
Which are, it's good. We definitely want to know where the poles are, because if our thought is one approach is to mount on poles throughout the city, that's one option. But the laying out of fiber would need to be through an existing right of way, so we don't get up against the rights of homeowners, landowners. We'd have to get permission from.
Gotcha.
To lay cable through. My suspicion is we have sufficient rights of way throughout the city. That's one of the nice things about this city, to lay out the framework. Dana, as a separate category, because I'm not sure if it would be combined in or not. There are rights of way that run along rail lines.
Correct. Yes.
Within and through the city as well. So that may be a separate category of rights of way. And it may also make sense to ask Brad if he knows of other categories of rights of way that we may want to include. And then color code them accordingly. Here are these, and here's how they connect to each other. Because that is going to be the skeleton of this beast.
Do you think that we will at least trying to code some of the map data?
Mhm.
Do you think we should keep that internal? That's why I was asking about like
Well,
possibly requesting like us to have a licensed map geo account, because then I can manipulate like the data
right.
layers
It's,
depending on any demographics and all that.
if we can get a license account, that's good. I definitely think that's a thing to pursue, particularly as we move into the next phase of the report. We may say, okay, based on our analysis of the maps that were provided to us, we want to tweak it a little bit and see what plays. I think it makes sense to pursue both. But right now, let's see if they have the existing maps for us as well, just for the sake of timing. The good news is all this would still be internal in a sense because it's going to the Common Council and the mayor.
Okay.
So, really, at some point, will it be going out to the public? Yes, absolutely. But those wouldn't be necessarily top secret classified data either. That's publicly available data. Normally you'd have to make a FOIL request for it. But people with construction projects make those requests all the time. So that's a common thing. Okay. I think that it makes sense to have the maps included as a complete set as an appendix to the report. So what we say is this section, refer to Appendix A for detailed maps of X, Y, Z. That way, you're not taking up a lot of space within the body of the report that might confuse people reading it. But you can make the references that you need to make. And we can then look at what makes the most sense. And we can say in phase 2, as we move from the preliminary report to the final report, we'll make recommendations to specific frameworks or paths that seem to make the most sense from a cost point of view, a utility cover, a cover from a coverage point of view, and then a mix of both. Because we can say, well, here doing Plan A would give us 100% coverage. The bad news is it costs us 3 times what anything else would, versus Plan B, which gives us 80% coverage of those areas that don't have any right now or very little, but it's a third of the cost. Okay, that would be really nice if that miracle occurred, but it would be good to lay those choices out. The other thing we still need to think about is just long-term beyond the maps. If we do coordinate some of our work with the county's version, with the county version of the commission that's just starting up, it may make sense to how we can then connect to what they're going to do outside the city of Albany and save costs for both parties.
Do you know if they have any information published on that? I've been searching the county website.
Not really. My impression is no. I think they're
okay.
I think it's so. They really just announced this a couple months ago.
Yeah, because I've been digging.
Yeah, and I mean, I know only the one name of who they brought in to chair it, and they're very qualified. From the Center for Economic Growth, but I haven't heard much about who else is going to be on it, what their meetings are going to be like, and actually I'm waiting for an email back from their chair because we talked about getting together just to talk shop. But I think that for them it's very early days, so we shouldn't necessarily let what we're doing be limited by what they're doing. And actually what we're doing may give them an improved map as they move ahead. So they may get some cross utility from our report for both the city and the county if the county decides to move ahead with anything. I think the concern is that both levels of government recognize the importance of doing a broadband network, and that there's a lot of money floating around finally to sort of make this occur. So no one wants to just let that pass them by. So the politics may get a little muddy. But the good news is the leadership on both sides tend to get along on projects that benefit both. So I think we'll be okay.
Okay.
But the maps will definitely be a big step for us.
Just to piggyback off of what you mentioned earlier about the phases,
sure.
From some model cities that I've seen, when they were doing their build out for the deployment, their phases were in like years. Like the most average one I see is like 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 10.
Yep.
For our sake, how do you feel about that?
Well, that's a good question. That's one of the things we need to think about. To be perfectly honest, and
this is no average.
Yeah, and this is just me. It comes down to the money. If we have the money to do it, it makes sense to move quicker. I tend to view the fact that cost of supplies rarely go down. They go up. So current money will buy us X amount of supplies to do this. But in 5 years, it may only get us Y amount of supplies to do this. So it makes cost projections a little more challenging. I personally would like to see, and I'm very open to the group weighing in, and that's not saying, well, what do you think? I would want, if we do it as a phased approach, I could see it as 2 phases to cover the city. With a sort of and by that I mean not necessarily 2 distinct phases, but there's like a 1 and a 1A, let's call it that, and a 2 and a 2A. So we know that the underserved areas we want to serve. That's part of the critical that'll tie us into some of the Fed money and state money to make this happen. At the same time, as we're working on that, now the county gets in with their piece. They're sort of coming in from outside the city in towards the city. Well, the city's part of the county too. So now we have a chance to sort of split materials costs to cover those areas which have good service now, but it's limited to one provider, which we kind of agreed previously was kind of old hat and kind of foolish. Because Spectrum really hasn't exactly been a friend to the people of the city of Albany. But right now they have the cable contract, which gives them almost exclusive to everything else. Fios is a thing, but outside the city, AT&T is getting into some things. But if we do a dark fiber network and say, now we're throwing it open to anybody that wants to come in, you're going to bid for the right to have space on our network and provide services at these reduced costs, we've increased the competitive marketplace and potentially lowered costs of actual service. And we can make one of the conditions the zero cost tier for people in certain categories of need, which is one of the things that we talked about too. If people are at an income level where they're, even if we said $20 a month, it's not going to be possible for them, but they still need it. We can see, okay, you now qualify for this tier, which is the same level of service that everybody else gets that has a home service, but it's zero cost to you. We offset that by the concessions we get from the different people that want to compete for the market, and the cost for the commercial accounts, and then any fees that get labeled on top of using the network adds, various streams of revenue, which I know that Martin has addressed a bit in his portion. I personally, as I say, I would look to complete the initial layout of the network sooner rather than later, because that allows us to make the case to the competitive marketplace here's what we can offer. You now have access through a network to a population of close to 100,000 people, and then more that may come in that utilize the network because they're coming into the city to work, go to school, et cetera, et cetera. That gives us a very good product to sort of push from the city's point of view. And we have the advantage of current cost versus future cost. The only reason I think there will be a phased approach is when we tell them the initial cost of doing a network like this, that's going to scare the living daylights out of anybody that has to be reelected for a living. Justifiably, hi, we're going to raise your taxes 30%. No, you're not. So really it's going to come down to what can we get through grants, through, different means, bonds, to make this happen. And I think that's an important and a very important aspect of this. I also think if we go the authority approach of creating something like we do with the water department. Water department, we split off the water system, the water system from city government. We've done it with a couple things. So you're creating essentially a special district for broadband, which covers the city of Albany through an authority created through a mix of state and local law, who then has the authority to charge a fee. And the city gets a degree of a portion of that money. The rest goes to maintaining and repairing the network. That may help us get it in fewer phases than might be possible if we went with just the city running it. But it's a thought. I mean, these are things that are on the table. Jeff, I know we talked a little bit earlier about it. And Martin, you may want to weigh in on that too. From your perspective, from the finance side, would it seem that an authority would make more sense as a way to run it, let's say?
I mean, I don't think I've, looked into that, specifically and such. But, I think it's really, kind of dependent on, really what, the local electeds would want. I mean, I've seen it where, basically, I've seen it where you've had some municipalities will operate it. You will create a separate authority that, has, degree of independence to, build out, a network in some sort. And then you have, some cities that would just rather keep it within like a typical city department.
Right. I mean, I can say that from our point of view, doing the benchmarking of the communities that we've looked at so far, it's definitely a mix of both. Some of the more successful ones we've seen do at least at some point go the authority approach, because it gives them an opportunity to bond and do things that they may not get if they're just a city department. It provides some legislative flexibility, would be the way I'd put it. Commonly, authorities /special, what they call special districts, are limited to things like fire. You see a lot of that with a lot of town fire departments, the different volunteer fire and for water. Beyond that, utilities, it tends to be on either state level control or national level control with some city departments. So things like power are usually more a real internal government control, because it's a critical working with the private sector, because it's a critical it's considered a critical infrastructure. So they take that approach. Water has been the exception of the rule to a great extent, as far as what's normally considered critical infrastructure. And broadband is actually now considered a category of critical infrastructure. it's a newer addition to those categories, but I think that it's worth exploring. Certainly, we want Caitlin to weigh in on that at some point, because the legal piece to doing that is kind of involved. I'd have to go back and look at what the city did when we split off the water department, which was during the Whalen administration. He split off the water department from city government and created the water authority as we know it now. And he was able to do it, I believe, within a year. So it's, even if we started initially building the network as part of a city effort, a city government effort, it could transition to an authority once it was formally created.
Yeah, I think that would probably be like, the best, way to do it, only because, whatever portion of this, begins to open up, I mean, it's a good way to, kind of see how this would work, in the city of Albany,
Right.
and glean some lessons before, ultimately deciding to make that jump to an authority where, service could expand, beyond, that initial baseline.
Yeah. I mean, I think the advantage too with the authority approach is, as I said, they do have the ability to bond. It wouldn't then affect the city's bond rating, which is good. And they have, but the board that would run it is still city appointed. I mean, the commissioner is still a city commissioner. The board is still a city board. It's a separate governmental entity. It's sort of like an LLC for government. There's only so much that you can do to us if it goes belly up for some reason, God forbid. And it's a way to control costs being passed along to taxpayers, as opposed to, we've created this means for people to buy into it. We have the existing network itself, be it water, be it broadband or anything else, and we can move forward. So it allows a more focused approach to the work, other than a city department that may already be burdened with, okay, here are the 5 things our city department has to do, and broadband is just one of them, versus broadband is what we do. So we'll do it well, and we'll hire people that can do that accordingly. So things from staffing to anything else, you're going to have a more strategic approach to the administration. But that's just my 2 cents on it. Jeff, what do you think?
I think it makes sense to include both as recommendations, and maybe not necessarily take a firm stance on one of, offer more of a carte blanche of options to the common council and the administration, and they can take it there. But I think we should present, both or any other scenario.
I think that makes sense. I mean, really, it's not our decision to make necessarily. We can say we've identified these as options. Here are the advantages and disadvantages of both. Think about it, get back to us, and then we can pursue that as part of our next report. Hey, here's what it would take. Given the fact that we have basically a little more than a month to get the preliminary report done. Then Diana, does that make sense to you as well? I mean, I think that's
correct. Yes.
Okay. Martin, would you be supportive of that approach? You're on mute, just.
Yes, I have no problem with that approach.
Great. I mean, we don't have enough people here to say we're taking a vote and that's what we're going to do, but I think we can share that with the rest of the group, and I don't imagine anyone would have a problem with it. I think that's the most palatable approach. Okay, so that's good. The only other thing that I wanted to bring up tonight was, as we move into June, we need to think about, we may want to have more meetings when we start to assemble the report itself. I'm gonna go to Jeff in just a minute, let him talk a little bit about the framework that he sent out earlier. where we're going to try and fit things in to sort of come up with common language around the sections to be sure they all blend well. But it also has to be acceptable to all the people that worked in those sections. So, Jeff, you want to talk a little bit about what you sent before, and we can go from there?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Sorry, I'm just pulling it up right now. So I apologize. I sent it a little closer to the meeting than I would have liked. So I understand if folks hadn't had a chance to take a look. But I added it into the preliminary draft that Caitlin had put together that outlines how we will look at each thing and make sure we are, we're hitting the benchmarks we need for each section. So, I wanted to provide a couple, I guess I had two questions, actually. I know we briefly discussed citations, and I believe we had settled on, or it was suggested that we use APA formatting. Okay, that's what I thought. So I have that in there with a link in case folks need to take a look. The other question I had is, and I don't know if we had covered this, but do we want to use footnotes or endnotes to that point, or do folks not have a preference?
I personally prefer footnotes. I think endnotes gets a little confusing, but I'm open to any ideas.
Yeah, I don't personally have a preference. I think, they both can work, and yeah, maybe footnotes do look a little cleaner. So, everyone can take some time and think about it, and I'll ping folks just for an update. So, just some other best practices to make sure we're sourcing or providing sources for our information where it's applicable. As far as writing style, we want to keep it from the viewpoint of the commission. When you're writing, that'll help when we're trying to go through. I apologize, my dog is chewing on his toy.
That's okay.
In the background. But as we're going through, it'll make it easier as we're trying to deconflict each section. And if folks are writing from one unified voice of the commission while they're going through, as far as writing, as much as we can, I think it would be helpful if we make sure we're following the format. Even though we're creating a bigger report, each section should be its own story. Reference things, have a conclusion, recommendations. So for the section structure, Martin, I think you and your group did a great job with how it is. So my suggestion there was just a brief introduction, introducing the topic, area, or problem that we are addressing. In the body, we should be explaining our findings and explaining any recommendations. So, those can be broken up into the sections that Caitlin has referenced in her report, or again, as Martin has broken down in his section that he provided. And then finally, we should include a conclusion for each section that, again, wraps up the problem, explains the recommendations, touches on everything. So, I don't want to make it overly, or at least in my opinion, I don't think we should make it overly academic or, get too into the weeds. If the public's reading this, we should try to use layman's terms as much as possible. So again, just a lot of recommendations I had in there that I thought would be helpful as we start thinking about this cohesive final draft. So
right.
If folks can take a look, and again, I'll ping anyone for any feedback unless, you guys have anything right now.
I think it makes sense. I definitely agree that it should be more of a plain language approach. The idea is we know it's going to be a very diverse audience reading this. They brought us in because in theory we bring skills to it that they don't necessarily have. So we now have to translate it for the greater audience. The one tip I'd add in is if you are using, which is part of that, different act and different specific slang or acronyms that are specific to your area, spell out what they are. Because people won't know. It may make perfect sense to you because you've been reading the material or been putting it together, but we really need to spell it out for them. And then we can take a look at it as a group, certainly, I would think more than once. Once we've put the pieces together to see if it makes sense. We all agree it makes sense to us.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great one.
Yeah. I would suggest we have the Google Drive. I would suggest that we really start a specific, and perhaps Jess can help with this, a specific Google Doc where people can start to put their pieces into the doc, and have a folder there that's identified as the Massister that allows us all to be in, and we can edit and do what we're going to do within the shared doc. And I'd say, as someone who's been doing a lot of it recently, use the comments feature more than if you go in and say, and we want to make an edit, if it's not your area, don't just wipe out 5 lines that someone's written. There may be a good reason that they wrote it, but you can put a comment in saying, what did you mean by this? Or here, I'd suggest this instead. And they can choose to accept the comment or comment themselves. That way it allows the group to really see the thought processes involved and allows us to keep the doc moving forward towards the draft that we want. One of the things that we talked about, and I have to reach out to Chief on that, was a little muddying with when the draft report is due. We'd set into June. Chief came back at one point and said, well, great, June 15th. And I think we questioned that at the time and said, well, end of June is really better. And Jeff and I talked earlier today, and certainly from a leadership perspective, we think end of June is probably better, given everything that people have going on. Ideally, we have a master doc assembled by mid-June that then we spend the last couple of weeks saying, okay, tweak this sentence, tweak that sentence. I believe it's achievable. Part of that, as I say, may involve different, what I would call small group meetings, not just teams, but team and anyone else that feels they want to weigh in on that section. So right now we meet once every other week. As we get closer, we may need an hour on 1 or 2 nights, but the goal is to keep it manageable. So that said, there were some dates that we looked at. I have to tell you that I will not be available for the most part, starting from about 6:15 on through 6:19, because I will be away. Doesn't mean that things have to stop, but just I won't be able necessarily to weigh in during that 4 or 5 day period. So I'm going to recommend that we look at dates like, we have a meeting on June 2nd. That's our next meeting. I'm going to suggest maybe June 7th as one of those extra meetings. First look at, does that date work for the people that are here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I could be available that day.
You should, Martin? Yeah.
Yes, I should be available.
Great. And then looking into the next week, June 13th or 14th, instead of our June 16th meeting. So we would move the meeting from the 16th back to either the 13th or the 14th. Do either of those days pose a problem for anybody?
Yeah, I should definitely be there for either of those 2 days. I know, well, basically, my job's travel season is starting to kick back up again.
Okay.
So if there are any changes to my availability, I'll let you know as soon as possible.
Yeah, and we can adjust. I think that's the thing. So if those dates work, let's put this out. Jess, can you send an email out to the greater group, and we'll say, do either one of those dates work better for people, work worse for people, and we'll go with whichever one of the two.
What were they? June 13th and 14th, you said?
Right. We'll definitely be doing a meeting June 7th.
Okay.
Then June 13th or 14th. And then I'm thinking, next one we thought of was June 22nd. Does that work for people? Okay. Martin, you okay with that one?
I am not sure if I can do that particular Wednesday.
Oh,
But you know, I don't want to, you know, hold anyone up with that if like that works for the whole group. I'll probably end up like figuring something out.
Oh, okay. Let's sort that out. Let's leave that as a possible right now. See if there are other people that have a problem with it. See where we're at, and then as we're getting close to actually delivering, when we have to deliver the report across, we're thinking 6/28 or 6/29, possibly both, depending on what's going on, but certainly one of those.
Definitely, I know I can't do the June 29th, but I can do June 28th.
Let's plan for the 28th. Put that as the preferred date. And anyone that can't make the 28th, we could potentially do a follow-up with them on the 29th. Just so that we confirm that everybody's on board before we actually send the report across, ideally on the 30th. So that, Jess, did you get those dates? Or do you need?
Am I muted? I can't tell.
No, you're
I'm
on.
not muted.
No, you're not muted.
Yeah, I got those dates. The only thing is, when it comes to the live streaming, are these gonna technically be like the regularly scheduled meetings, or are these gonna kind of be
The
different?
one on the 13th or the 14th will be a regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay.
The others will be what I would call executive session.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Working on the drafting.
Mhm.
So we should label them as such.
Okay, so June 7th and June 22nd,
Yep.
or 22nd will be the executive ones.
Yep, and also also June 28th
Okay.
and or 29th.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. We may want to, as weird as this sounds, consider doing a final live stream meeting on the 30th if we're presenting the report. We say we have a report, but we can discuss that at our next meeting and see how people feel. Because it might make sense to do a live stream meeting where the public, whoever's might be tuning in, say, okay, hey, we're handing this report across to the Common Council and the mayor for their consideration. But we can think about that one. There's time on that.
And Craig, I have a few questions.
Sure.
Just referring back to Jeff's report section structure.
Yeah.
So besides the maps, they'll, as I sent like in the email the other day, there'll be other types of like infographics included. So you prefer those to actually be an appendix and not within the body of text itself?
I'd say it depends on the size.
Okay.
So I mean, some graphics lend themselves to being like between paragraphs. It's not going to create weird page breaks. My thought on that is the maps make sense almost to have as a separate appendix because they're bigger. But if you have different graphics, definitely feel free to put them in. If you are in the process of doing it and you say, gee, that looks really weird, we can always add them as an extra appendix at the end, or we may want to have a separate appendix for them anyway. In addition, we can say, well, here we have the graph here. They're also included in Appendix B for this purpose. And I'd say that's true for any of our sections. Martin, if you have graphics that you think would lend itself more to an appendix, let's look at that, like a table or cost projections, anything like that. To me, that's where actually the meat of a report sometimes is found.
Right.
The big picture stuff, let's call it that. Certainly we'll have some things like that for the benchmarking team here. These cities we looked at, here are components that we looked at. So we'll have that in a section. But I think that makes sense. For the legal, the sponsorship stuff, Jeff may want that too. Here's people we suggest for these categories of sponsorship. Here's people we may want to reach out to. Caitlin may have something for the legislative piece. Here's if we take this approach. So, as you're adding your piece in, think of what makes most sense from a reader's point of view. Does it muddy the water, or is it important that that graphic be there because it provides context to what
And
you
it's
said?
relevant. Mhm.
Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable.
And just to confirm,
Sure.
from earlier, the request I should try to seek out right now from like the planning department with Brad is the rights of way, correct?
Right.
And then I know Luke mentioned that we may possibly be referred to the water department, but if I got that, like that's like the meat and potatoes there, then like I can use
then
it
you're
for graphics and all that. Yeah.
Really, what you're looking for from Brad are, they're normally called utility rights of way and railroad rights of way. Certainly we want at least those, but if he has different categories of rights of way, that may be useful for us to know as well. Those are the ones that I can think of the most. Utility should cover phone, power, things like that. Railroad would be usually run alongside the railroad lines, both active and inactive railroad lines. And the reason that that's important, just by way of example, is the county rail trail, which runs through a good portion of the city of Albany, and actually out into the towns, hooks into the Empire Trail down along the river, which also has a rail line, and that cuts across the south end and into North Albany. The advantage of the county rail trail, which is a defunct rail line, is that the railway rights of way are still in place. And it's already a cleared, paved path, roughly 10 miles long, that would take you from downtown Albany all the way to uptown Albany. So if you had to lay a network along those lines, you would certainly have good coverage for the south end. You'd have coverage for basically the first ward in the city of Albany, the first ward in the city of Albany, the seventh ward in the city of Albany, and the eighth ward in the city of Albany. And also that would be something the county might be interested in, that allows them to tie into Bethlehem, Gilliland, New Scotland, and Voorheesville at a minimum. So if we start to build our network out along that line and then across basically the Broadway corridor along the river, we now have a good two-sided boundary set up for the city. And if you cut across and come up basically through where the Tivoli Lakes Preserve is, there's actually a railway right of way there as well. And that would give you North Albany, West Hill and Arbor Hill along that edge of the city.
Oh yeah, you're right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So you've got a giant U basically coming up through, and then you also have to fill in the internal bridge work. It's a simple layout, which is nice.
It will help with the conduit. Yeah.
Yes, it will. Yeah. And I mean, it's, as I say, those are cleared paths that utility vehicles use all the time. So we know that they're accessible. We know they're available. And it allows us to utilize existing structure to an extent anyway, which may reduce some of the initial, digging, clearing sort of costs. If we can piggyback on existing fiber, that would be nice, but I doubt that's the case. Also, that would tie us into the academic institutions up through SUNY and out into the 15th ward when we get to that phase. Because actually along the thruway and along the northway, You have railroad rights of way up through the middle of both.
Yeah.
So again, it's more a spider web that's already there rather than one we have to make. But let's see what Brad comes back with. We may have some options that make more sense.
Will the income be based off of federal poverty guidelines? Like when we say like needs
well,
for
that's a question.
underrepresented?
I think that's a good question. I would think yes, but there is some flexibility that states have and communities have within that. So if you're within, as far as we don't have to accept the poverty line of the federal government, which has been questioned a lot. Is it low enough? Is it high enough? Is it should the poverty line be moved up because a dollar doesn't go as far as it did? So communities do have the flexibility to say, okay, if we're within X percentage of the federal poverty line, up or down, and I would think we would go up. So if the federal poverty line for a family of three, I'm just going to throw a math out there. Let's say it was $35,000 a year. It's not, but let's say that it was. We could set our standard as $55,000 a year or $45,000 a year. That would allow us to include more people. And even if we started to phase down to zero cost, so I say, okay, if you're between 35 and 45,000, you get a 75% discount off of what you'd have to pay. If you're from 35,000 and down, you pay zero. We can start to think about how that scale will look, but we should really research what the actual scale is now and think about how we want to approach that.
Yeah, because then that would, essentially affect like the SLLs, the service level agreements, and also too like the subscription tiers, and then like the market, the market segmentation that we're trying to do, like commercial, residential, and all that. Would I know, like you said, we probably will just circle back around to that. Would that just be based off of like us as like the broadband as the department, or something that is probably already existing right now with the city of Albany?
Well, the city of Albany does have some existing standards for different programs, but I think that's the advantage of going with an authority. You could basically say you're not necessarily, I don't think you couldn't say, well, no, you have to earn less than what the city of Albany said you use to define need. But that could be legislatively determined. We've decided that we'll set the agreements at this because, let's say, the median income in the city of Albany is X. For those within the poverty, within the noted poverty levels, the income level average is this. We're going to give people a range to say you're included. Our goal here, and that's where actually that's going to be a common council and mayor type of decision.
Okay.
Is what is the goal? Is the goal to provide service to all those that really need it and can't necessarily afford it at a level that allows us to have true inclusion and equity of service across the network, which is, I think, a goal that we've talked about before, and we all want that. I think it's achievable. And the interesting thing is we'd be one of the first communities in the nation to do it. And I think the only reason it hasn't been done elsewhere is they didn't think of it. There's one community that has that I found so far. They're out in Colorado. Different communities do provide lower cost to certain people within certain income levels. And there are grant programs they can apply for to get the cost paid. But as far as an actual tier where the cost to them is zero, doesn't exist.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
No, and I think as I say, I think it's just, call it political will combined with lack of vision, for lack of a better way of putting it. But our city has the capacity to be better than that. And I think right now there's sufficient political will within both the common council, within the common council, and in the mayor's office to take that step. And it may be a unifying step for our city moving forward. So there may be some. Yep.
Well, also too, I mean, that federal, broadband subsidy that's out there, I mean, that would, definitely bring the cost down to potentially, zero or as low as it possibly can.
Sure.
I mean, already you have, cities and, towns with, even just, regular commercial internet service, they're, now starting to see that, for certain people in certain income levels and stuff, the cost is effectively, zero to provide such a service because of that subsidy.
Right. I think that's true. And I think if there's one good thing that comes out of the pandemic, if we can say a good thing coming out of the pandemic, is that more and more communities are recognizing that need. It is now a prime priority within government at every level to be sure that schooling can occur, services to seniors can occur, service to people at risk can occur in new ways. The challenge is to do it in a way that's both truly cyber secure, and at a level that they can actually use and say, okay, I know how to access this, I know how to use this, combined with the technology itself. It's one thing to create a net and to create a broadband network. It's another thing to put a computer, an iPad or something like that, a tablet of some form, into a person's hand to utilize that service. There are strides being made in both categories, but we can't lose sight of the fact there are two pieces here. Both technology and access. In the city here, we've done better with that, and that we're like taking the schools, for example, getting computers out to students. We've done much better with that. But the challenge they said is, well, great, we can get them a laptop, we can get them a tablet, but they don't have the internet. So we now have to step our part of it up to match the technology piece. And I think we have the capacity. As I say, it's almost, the tendency of government is to take a slow, steady approach to things. Very little change across a long period of time for most things, unless there's a critical event. Well, we have one. So now, just as we move the pace on trying to develop and roll out vaccines, we have the opportunity with this to do the same thing. Let's move this along and take advantage of the momentum that's already started before they suddenly notice that, oh, we don't need to move as quickly anymore. Let's set the pace for that to occur to the extent that we can. We can't force them, but we can point out to them that the chance exists to do this now. That might not be here 5 years from now. Might not be here three years from now. 2024 is coming. You don't know who's going to be controlling national government. I know who I hope will, but I prefer to get this done now, just in case I'm wrong. But yeah, I think, Martin, you're right. The subsidies are there. So the mayor recognizes that. I know the city council recognizes that. And I believe our state delegation recognizes that. So let's give them a way. Let's give them a way of getting it done. I would love nothing more than for all of us to be able to look back at this in 3 years and go, wow, look at what we did. We can get it there. So you've all been doing great work. It is appreciated. Believe me, I know it's tough between jobs and lives and just normal day-to-day. God knows what's going to happen next. What I say is, and you've all been very good about this, and I appreciate it very, very much. If you do run into a problem where you need an extra hand, or you have a question, definitely reach out as quickly as you can. And we'll coordinate things back and forth to help keep moving things ahead. That's all that I've got right now, to be honest. Any questions? Diana, Jeff, Martin,
No,
Lou?
good.
Jess?
Nope.
Nope, nothing.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, I'm going to suggest, since we're an hour in, which is our goal, to keep this to an hour. I'll take a motion to adjourn. If anyone would like to make it.
I'll make that motion.
All right. Second.
I'll second that.
Okay. That said, we have motion made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Yep. Okay. All right, folks. All right. Thanks very much. And we'll be